Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. I'm Thomas. Always great to be back again, and I have Aaron with
Erin,
me again. Hey,
Erin's
Aaron.
here. Hi, everyone.
So, I'm off to Chicago this week for Type Thursday Chicago. It's very exciting times. I definitely wanted to make time to get some sessions in with Aaron for Fontribute before I fly on out. So, Aaron, what are we talking about today?
Ooh, we're talking about two typefaces designed by the same wonderful person. I'm going to say Gerard or Gerard Unger, however you want to pronounce his name. They were released by Type Together, and their names are Alvarada and Sanserata. And they're similar in some very interesting ways. Alvarado was designed first and then Sanserata after it. So we're going to kind of take a look at these related typefaces and try to figure out the differences and what maybe the thinking was behind some of these choices.
Fantastic. So, I know I always love when we explore the same two designs from the same designer, right? And their naming's very, I can tell they're supposed to have a relationship to each other from their naming. So I'm excited to move forward on this.
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, why don't you start by talking about that? What on earth, Sanserata? What do you think that means?
Well, clearly means like sans serif, right? So we'll get started with our kind of the clear moves here. So we can see this kind of what we call glyphic serifs, right, in Alvarado, and this kind of a flag serif kind of angled energy, right, on the top terminal. Compare that to the sans serif approach we see, right, in sans serrata. That's the one the clear differences we can see between the two. Uh, I don't want to steal all the observations, so Aaron, how about you jump in and see what else you were seeing?
Are you referring to this little
Indeed,
kick?
exactly.
Woo! We got a little kick going out on the side of the end, which is kind of fun that that little bit of quirkiness was kind of retained. This, at least the right half of this was kind of um, pasted onto the Sanserata version here. And here, this is actually like moving outward as well. So there's a little bit of flaring happening on those opposite corners of the Sanserata end. But you can also notice that just in general, Alvarada is more narrow. The entire character is more narrow. Like check this, check the width of the internal space here. So Sanserata got a lot wider, and there's lower contrast right here. So checking out this little junction here versus the very kind of tiny little touching point in Alvarada. So we're going to see a little bit of difference in the contrast throughout this project, I believe.
Excellent. By the way, one thing I want to note, you can tell these fonts were designed under the theme system. Do you notice that the metrics of it are exactly the same?
Yeah. Oh, and within it, woo, as we will note later on as we go through the character set, that is a darn high X height. That is very, very high. And I know that Herard designs a lot of typefaces that perform well at small sizes, and both of these typefaces, I believe, were designed to be read, it's small type, and definitely sans serif on screen. That was one of the goals. So high X height is something you'll very commonly see in typefaces designed for small sizes.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's good for now. I think we can move forward with the other letters after this.
I agree.
Great. So over here, the first thing I could have made this observation in the ends, but I figured the O would be a more useful place to talk about it. I could see the higher contrast in Alvarado versus Sanserata. So one of the differences I can see right there is the contrast, right? The relation of thick parts to thin parts. That's one of the main distinctions I see across these two designs so far.
Although actually it's more subtle in the O than I would have expected. But yes, anyway, I agree that you can tell that there's higher contrast in Alvarada. And again, like I was saying, the Sanserata character, the N, and as we can see in the O, it also got a bit wider as well. But they both still have kind of a similar curved profile in terms of, a little bit more rectangular sort of forms compared to some of the other typefaces you've seen us blab about in previous episodes. So anyway.
No, it's all good. I think the main reason why I was able to identify the higher contrast in Alvarado it's the amount of flaring, like kind of working from this thin stroke to how much it flares out, right? Versus in this approach. That was how I was able to discern that, this was a lower contrast approach versus this one. Is that comprehensible? I don't know.
Okay, it is. It's good.
Okay, cool.
That
That's fine. Ready to move on?
I'm ready. Whee! Okay, cool. This one, these sorts of characters, it's easier to kind of tell what we're talking about. Again, just like we noted in the N, checking the differences here, like how tiny that little connection gets. Here it's much thicker, obviously. Same thing up here. Just check out those differences in those areas so you can tell the difference. But it's also interesting, again, like I've mentioned before, the width difference. And here is where we can actually kind of see that height. So what we're talking about, the X height in relation to what the S center height is. So it's very, very large X height, like we were saying. Any other observations?
I think it's interesting in this letter, we can see kind of, again, this obvious flare glyphic flag serif on the top. It feels oddly similar in Sanserata. I mean, it's not obvious. There's a more abruptness in this approach in Alpharata versus Sanserata, but I could feel in some way this a DNA approach similarity between these two.
Yeah, I
At this
agree.
point.
Yeah, I think he wanted to keep make it more, more neutral, more sans like, but keep like a tiny bit of that like flavor and stuff. And I read the little blurb that was written by Type Together about the typeface, and Gerard was saying that the decision to make these kind of flares going out is that to try to compensate for on screen when there's kind of light shining around a character, that this will kind of keep it looking a little bit more crisp. Whereas if it were just a rectangular form, like the light kind of shining around, it might make it end up looking a little smaller, a little more rounded. So I think it was kind of like the opposite of an ink trap. Whereas we're going to try to, thank you, beautiful.
Yes, adding all I can.
The opposite kind of approaches of an ink trap that we discussed in previous episodes, whereas in this case he wanted it to kind of move outward to kind of make it a little bit stronger of a character. So who knew? Very cool. Whoops.
There you go. We both said it. Okay, I think we can move on from here.
Oh, we can. I agree.
E. Oh, how fun.
Ooh, that is fun.
I mean,
take it away.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here because I can see clearly the difference is this flowy little schnozzle of an E versus this like power beak, this little beak just beaking out. Really different flavor because of that, right? Do you like my technical term of schnozzle?
I sure do. I like it. Usually I make the sound effects.
It reminds me of dogs. Dogs. Are you enjoying my dog?
I love dogs.
I know.
Yes, I love anthropomorphic letters. It's very good. I agree. And yeah, the sharp talon, we'll use the same terminology. We've got a little sharp talon barb down there, which is interesting. And here where it actually like flares outward in both directions. So that's interesting that it was a different approach there. But then again, I guess, historically, or if you're trying to look at other kind of models, the sans serif, there's always usually a kind of very blunt, visible bottom of the E, whereas in some more high contrast typefaces, this this appendage here would be a little bit thinner. So I guess that's why that kind of works. But yeah, that's so interesting. Also, just checking out the tapering of this.
Yes.
The different. Yeah, that's pretty cool too to notice that difference.
Yeah, I wonder. Do you think this was done to maybe mimic some other aspects of the letters? Do you think, or what do you think the motivation? What do you think the motivation was for that decision?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, like I can tell that. Golly, what can I tell? Can I tell anything? No, I can't. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd have to see more of the letters to see if that sort of thing would come back into play. I mean, I know Gerard likes to really wants to plan into his typefaces having for these gaps, like gaps where there would be, or not gaps, I mean junctions where there would be ink spread or this or that or whatever. He's always like thinking about that when he's designing a typeface. So I know like he wouldn't have made it this thick the whole way through, and so that's eating out. But then, eating out of that area. But then again, this, I don't know, if he had kept it this thin all the way through, what would that have looked like? So maybe, maybe that does have to do with, if we're talking about the flaring of all the different serifs or something as glyph, being glyphic or whatever. Do glyphic E's typically look like that? I don't even know.
That's
I gotta
not
look at my
that's my
history.
memory.
Maybe it's like cuneiform G or E or something, like a wedge. I don't know. Okay, I'm just wasting people's
No,
time.
we're at this point we're speculating, Britt, but it's just take no. These are the kind of things that when you're exploring typefaces to consider. What would you do in this approach?
Sure.
Would it be possible to do a smooth transition as opposed to a rapid transition, for example?
Mm-hmm.
What effect would that have?
Yeah, and it is interesting here, like you said, like this is curved all the way up. It's not even like flat here. This is, the whole thing is kind of a very subtle curve. And like notice how far out this kind of pushes in this direction. Since this was designed for screen, like I know he wanted to make this inner counter as large as he could and make it a little bit more rectangular in order to get that kind of strength of the profile of the character in there. Huh. Interesting.
Therefore, a schnozzle.
Schnozzle appears. Oh my. Let's see. What's our next letter? Shall we? Ooh. Oh, yes. Okay. We usually don't include the I, but I put that in there. Well, one thing I noticed between the two.
Yeah, I see it.
The tittle got smaller in Sanserata, which I probably wouldn't have expected, I guess.
And raised up, yeah.
Yeah, and raised up. So that's kind of interesting. But again, like we were describing in the D and the N, we still have this kind of flowing line and even a little bit of flaring out this way too. So, this isn't your typical sans serif design. This definitely has a bit of, it's an informal, I think that's what they would call it, I guess, an informal sans serif, but maybe borderline, I'm not sure, but it's definitely not cut and dry. So I don't know.
Well, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Sure. Thanks for adding this slide in. Blah, blah. Okay, here we are with the Ys. Oh, fun. Mixing it up, I see.
Yeah, we've got some new characters. Let's go crazy. So tell me what you see.
What I see. I think actually what stands out to me is there's like this subtle curve happening in the sans serif in this side. It's fascinating. It's trying to maintain that wiggle effect, I feel like, going one way and then going the other on this part of the Y. It's very fascinating as our approach. I'm also a little surprised by the decision to how this terminal was handled, just comparing that to the E, for example, and other solutions in the letter. So that was probably the first thing I immediately caught my attention so far. Also, again, actually now I'm looking at it, look at this crazy. This is actually surprisingly a little out of character. This one's just like, it's so intense in its beakiness. Compared to the I feel like more subtle approach we've seen in other letters so far. That's fascinating. Also, a quick note, just see this is angled versus vertical, or horizontal in this case, excuse me. So there's like all these subtleties going on in sans serif that I think are very interesting. I'm curious to see how that's going to look in text settings.
Yeah, I thought that Y was very, very unusual and interesting, like you said, just how, how attention grabbing that is. That's definitely going to show up, and it's going to be very cool to see. Very interesting way to end the Y. But like, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like, a little bowl, or I don't know. It's definitely pushing out. It's bowing out. It's not a tight diagonal like here, like even on both sides. I think this
both sides, I see it
curved a little bit too. So that's kind of interesting. And again, I think that's probably, he did that probably because he wanted to capture more light in this light shining through that sort of counter area there, I assume. Anyway, so yeah, we better just wait to see how that plays out. Oh,
we gotta see how this is gonna play out.
One more thing. Oh, I forgot this is another. No, it's not a big deal. Just it's one more letter where it's good. to be able to see the difference in contrast. Sorry. So, we usually point this out. This is the dominant stroke, and this one's usually lighter, whereas here it's like the difference between the two is much more subtle. Okay, zipping it.
Yes, very true. Yeah, it's all good. Also, we can point out, you can also see basically tapering going on at the crotch area versus the top. Both are doing it, but obviously Alvarado is more obvious in that approach. All right, cool. Woo.
Yay! Huzzah!
That's really fascinating. Check this out. So with the capitals, so it seems like Sanserata is like in the caps, it's like a much more subtle version of the Alvarado caps.
Yeah, you're right. Instead of following the same methodology as this, they actually he kept that flaring in the capitals. So that's kind of cool. We'll have to look at some of the other capital letters.
Yes,
see if they were.
I'm even more fascinated now to see how this is going to work in text.
Oh yeah, that's neat. That is very cool. And again, like just how much wider did this H get? It's pretty funny to me. It's quite wide. Again, and Alvarado's capitals were a little bit more condensed. Just to begin with as a design. So again, it's so fun to see just how high these X heights are.
It's crazy. This is like an agate typeface level.
Right. Totally.
Crazy.
Totally. Very cool stuff. Nice.
Cool. Moving on.
Sure. Oh, I did include one. Yay! I just thought I didn't know which.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I didn't know which letter to choose, and I thought, well, let me choose the M because it's just the differences are extreme in the M. So.
Wow. Okay. I'm just gonna point out that whole midsection as a conversation point, and I'll just compare that to this approach, right? And then from there, Aaron, I'll let you jump on this one.
Yes, so that's a big obvious difference, but it's quite funny. Like I said, Alvarado, kind of a lot of the capitals are a little bit more similar in width. Sanserata, everything got wider, and some of these letters like M and W, got even wider still. But it's also kind of an interesting, a good example of showing some of the interesting tapering and checking the relative widths. We've got kind of a middle width, thicker, a lot like thinner again, and then again very thick. So it's kind of, if you're new to drawing letters or observing letter design, this was a very kind of clear example of showing how drawing an M, you're not always going to have the outside strokes being equal in width, even though they would be on an H or something. So that's kind of an interesting observation. And thank you, Alvarado, for being a good example. I don't know what else I want to say about it other than wowza. I wonder if any of the sample text has the M in it. Ooh.
I hope it does.
I hope it does. That'd be cool.
Because by the way, like Unger is kind of like fast, like a infatuation with all techniques of getting white space in and ink trap saving. You can see in full demonstration with this Sanserata. Take note of these basically kind of ink trap solutions at all the joints, right?
Yeah.
Take note of that. Take note of there's I see flaring going on. Like things are arched. There's like arching momentums going on. Very subtle, but they're there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
crazy.
good stuff. Woo.
Yeah.
So what's our next slide? I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, is it hamburger? Yeah. Okay. Now we.
Yep. Here we go. So.
Woo.
Yeah, we could definitely the thing stand out to me is how overwhelming the undercaps, the lowercase are. It's so large compared to the capitals. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, this is going to be, it almost looks like an extended, or almost looks like an expanded typeface in Sanserata because it's just so darn wide, but it's, it was drawn that way for the purpose. I'll stop being a broken record. I promise I'll stop saying that. But also, this is a good view to see some of the differences. So obviously we had, more traditional old style-y double-story G happening in Alvarado. T construction. Oh, this is funny. I wish I'd highlighted that.
Yeah,
there's a little flare on
that T. By the way,
fun.
shout outs. I did a typeface like that too, with that exact same strategy.
Oh, that's fun. This is also kind of cool seeing, that flat bottom V, you know, kind of the glyphic. And then again, like, yeah, we got kind of the rounded, it's, you
Yep.
know, it's not what you typically see in a common sans serif. So that's gonna be interesting. So far, I haven't yet seen anything that's mimicking this yet in any of these example letters, but who knows what we'll, you know, the A didn't do that, huh? So who knows what we'll find
Hmm.
if we keep digging for our next
Keep
slides.
going. Let's see what we find. Oh, we got our special character sets.
Yes, this is a popular slide. We always love these. So you know, as people can observe, we had a very different approach to the, at least some of these accented glyphs. You know, we've got something a little bit more, uh, I don't know, fluid kind of. How do we say? I mean, these are more mechanical kind of looking. They look more influenced by just what we're seeing in computer abstraction sort of crap, whereas this seems more like
Nice.
maybe made by a tool or something, you know, like wedgie and that sort of flowing flavor. Same thing with the quotes and stuff there. But notice again, like we've seen in some of the other, like we said, the agate typefaces, very large punctuation, which was designed to be seen at, you know, at small sizes. Oh yeah, it's like the Eric Spiekerman where I was making fun of that. Like,
Yep.
didn't he have a weird hybrid one or something? And I was like, "What the hell is this?" And he was upset about that. Probably, I think he's probably not listening to this, so who cares? But this looks like Gerard did this kind of a similar thing where he's got a little bit of a curve and then it kind of straightens. Anyway,
Sort of in that one,
observation.
but it's interesting because you didn't do that with the quotation marks.
Yeah, true. It's different. Yeah, that's interesting to see that. How
Yeah.
interesting. Um, yeah, and again, like we've been saying, we've got
Flare outs.
flares in all sorts of different places. So I don't
Yeah.
know what else to add, but
I mean, it's clearly like he's applying the program to everything in Alvarado. You know, it's the everything has to speak to that vocabulary, right? I am a
mhm.
little surprised at some parts where he's like, there's a certain feeling, right, in these terminals. It's like it's glyphic, it's sharpness, but not that strong, right? It's
Yeah,
not like overwhelmingly sharp, right? But I notice in some characters there's this extremeness in an approach, right? These are really sharp
yeah,
as an approach. It's really I found that fast. Let's compare that to how this feels. This feels much smoother, right?
that's true.
It's not as
That's
aggressive. So I always watch for that for typefaces, kind of when they apply the program or the system that we see in the main letters, like how aggressively do they apply it? Just contrast that to these approaches. In some ways, yeah, they kind of feel very defaulty, like defaulty sans serif, which I'm a little surprised about considering the effort taken to make this feel so I guess, or just casual and feeling. I'm actually a little surprised about that. I mean, if you're gonna go in the trouble of making your V's and your Y's these weird bowl shapes,
Yeah,
I'm a little surprised that approach wasn't given. I'm sure there's certain justifications for that, right? In terms of sizes and scale, I get that, but I don't know. Maybe that was probably the thesis why it made sense to strip them down. Like if you're seeing in text settings, you're not going to notice a weird bowling effect in a small shape like that. Maybe that's one possibility to defend the decision. I do want to take note, just that it's kind of like in this approach they went too extreme in the program, right? And here they were too conservative in the approach. Or at least that's one way of reading it.
sure, sure. Yeah, I'd love to see the. I can't remember if I've accented characters in our next slide. Oh God, I hope we do. What did
Well,
I use for the sample text?
here we go.
Dang it, Aaron, you fool. Whatever. Okay. Well, at least we can observe the we got a punctuation or I mean a percent.
Quotation marks.
Lord. Oh, golly, what's wrong with me? And then yeah, quotation marks, we've got some parentheses. Um so, you know, at this scale, obviously I mean these are quite dark at this scale. I don't know.
Hmm.
They look I mean they're a lot darker than, you know, this. This looks really natural, looks really good to me, but I'm a little maybe I just need to spend more time with it. Who knows? But to me, that's
Yeah, I see the
maybe it's
point.
a good thing. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I'm questioning everything. I
No, that's all good. I agree with you. I think they're too dark.
yeah, it's interesting. I should have read more about what the original intent was for this, or if it was made for like a newspaper. I don't even remember. I wish I had gone back. If anyone knows, comment on the video. um, what else can we see in here?
There's a
So
couple of things. One is like the body, right? It's like type is huge on the page because
Yeah.
this X side is so gigantic, right?
Hmm. Yeah, totally. It is. It's even though I saw some of these things as being quite. I thought they were quite subtle when we looked at them up close. It's like to me that these look to me like they look like very different typefaces when I look at them side by side. Just like the widths, the character width,
Yeah.
definitely these. This is a little more like I guess typical. I guess you call it Dutch style, in which a lot of the letters are very similar in width. There's not as much variance between letters. This just seems like, yeah, this is very casual seeming now. Now that I'm seeing the E in context, its roundness and the bowing out of those diagonal characters. Wow, it really and the flaring of the N. I mean, it's this is super cash or whatever you said.
Cash. Yes.
It's quite funny to me. It's very different. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, I would agree. I very much would agree. Right, the higher contrast I can see very clearly in Alvarada, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the lower contrast of Sans Serif and proportions, yeah, they give very different feelings because of that.
Wow. It's so interesting. Huh. Ooh, I really love Alvarado though. I love that bite to it. That very, oh, it's so cool. I love that feeling of incisions or whatever. Very,
Oh,
very
totally.
cool. Very good stuff.
I'm actually quite partial to the cheekiness and
Oh,
the
good.
cashness of Sans Serif.
So cute. Let's see. What else did we set this in? Did I have another example? Oh, good. We went even smaller.
You went small to try to demo how
Yeah.
you would probably want to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I think I threw in a bunch of, we used some text. I used a lot of capital letters in the text because I also wanted to observe like how that X height and kind of like the narrowness of these capital letters here in Alvarado. This would be a good typeface for setting acronyms because it's very condensed in the capital letters. Interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
You know what's actually standing out to me is I'm very impressed by Alvarada's text setting.
yeah. It's so beautiful. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
The
Because
evenness.
it's really fascinating with that super high contrast at the joints, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I think if you look at it in isolation, your assumption would be this is for display, right? Uh,
Right.
Yet
Yeah.
when I'm seeing in this setting, it seems like it's actually like I'm very impressed by the color, the evenness of color, its proportions, and its rhythm. It feels relatively good at this size.
Yeah, man, I love it. And now we actually get to look at those quotation marks and stuff at kind of a slightly more intended size and stuff. I mean, they still look a little dark, but I mean, I guess that's a good thing, I suppose.
It's within acceptance.
We approve, Herard, if that means anything to you. Um, I like it though, a lot, really a lot. Wow, and look at this A. I didn't notice how high the A bar,
Yeah,
crossbar is before. But I mean, I know that's like kind of historical nod, so that makes sense. But it's just kind of cool.
it's also in the Sanserata too.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. You're right. Huh. Very cool. Neat. I mean, I would love to see this on like on a website just to see if it kind of feels the same level of like I don't know. To me this isn't working as well as the Alvarado like in this context, but who knows? Maybe I'd be surprised if it were used actually as a live web font or something.
Do you think the
Because
word space is too small in Sanserata at this size?
good question. I'm glad you said that because yeah, I agree. I think it's a little snug. I don't like it that snug, so I think you're right. To me, the Alvarado proportion of the word space seems a lot better.
Yeah.
Good. Nice. Good comment.
Well, that's what I'm here. I do what I can. I talk gibberish sometimes. Sometimes around the mark. What can I say?
Yeah, probably about 10% of what we say is like really awesome. I don't know about the rest.
Ten
Oh, I'm
percent.
so
I would say 90. Maybe 10 is good. Like ridiculous bullshit coming out of our mouths.
mean. Oh God, I love it. Cool. Okay.
So here we
In
are. So,
summary,
Shannon, what's your conclusion of so far from looking at this?
conclusion, holy cow, they looked so different when we saw them in context. That I mean, I definitely think it was the width differences, but even though they had similar vertical, absolutely, actually not similar. They were the same vertical metric sort of situation. They just looked absolutely different when it came to the widths and the contrast, and but still that quirkiness. You definitely saw it, even at the small size. You definitely saw those quirky bits that we observed in Sensorata at the small size. What do you want to say about them?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, definitely. I actually almost wonder, is it appropriate? Like, there, I get why they're formally related, right? And their naming speaks to that. But in their, as we said, we discovered though, like their effects and texture in text settings is radically different. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's definitely not Alvarado Sands. That is not what this
that's
typeface
no, no, it's
is.
sans serrata. It's not Alvarado Sans for that exact reason. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can tell very clearly. And I think the general like again, like a big note for me was I was really impressed by this effect, this really high contrast joints, really not hindering at all anything about the
Mhm.
text settings. And if anything, it's uh, it seems an overall a more successful approach from our observations at this point.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't talk about that like hardly at all, but you're right. That totally worked extremely well in these areas. And I mean, I know that because these are slightly, these are more kind of rectangular forms. I guess your eye just kind of, will naturally just blend this together on its own and just make it seem connected at those small sizes anyway. So it looks so clear and crisp. I love it.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
it's crazy. Yeah, yeah, I'm almost in the position I would want to set my copy. Right, whoop, my marker going. Boop, set my copy in Alvarado and set my body head, like my header or something in Sans Serrata, mainly because of this word space decision uh,
Mm, yeah.
at this
Right.
point.
Right. Yeah. 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 I'm glad you mentioned that. Nice.
Awesome.
Ah, beautiful.
Whoop. Well, here we are, and my markers are still here. Whoop, get rid of that. There you go. Cool. Well, that concludes this episode of Contribute. Hope you all have a great week. And Aaron, looking forward to do another call with you real soon.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening.
Later.
Bye.